meeting is being recorded.
Okay, all right. If everybody could just help me out and turn off their microphones and their cameras, then that would be great. Awesome. And okay, I see a few of you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to tonight's class. Super excited to be here in the Eclectic Classroom. Hang on. I'm going to start over. There we go. Okay.
For that little mare with that lariat rope around her neck. And he opened the round pen corral and he sent that little mare in there. And I can see it happening right now. He sent her all the way across that round pen, stopped her. And he was talking. He says, she'll go across the round pen and she's going to step over in her hindquarters and she'll turn around and look at me. And she did. And he picked his finger up on that lariat rope and he says, now she's going to look off to her right. And then he picked up that lariat rope with his other hand. He says, she's going to look off to her left. And that mare didn't miss a beat. And I thought, I got to have that. That's something that I want. So I've spent the rest of my life working towards that. So, and I think I was either 28 or 29, Emily, when that took place. And I've been working at it ever since. But I'll never forget that. And we've had a lot of great moments. I was very blessed that Ray would maybe ask if he could come and do it. When he was coming to do a clinic, he'd ask if he could stay maybe an extra week, or he was going to take a little time off, or this, that, and the other. So I really cherished the time that we got to spend together. Oh.
I bet that was so special. That you tell the story great, because I can just see that. I can see that in my mind's eye with you telling it. Do you have some stories that maybe illustrate we were talking about the three things. Do you have some stories that maybe exemplify those things?
For sure. There was so many times, there was lots and lots of times, but one of the first stories that I'll tell a little bit is what helped kind of mold and shape this whole thing for me. Was that first clinic was a 5-day clinic. That's when he did 5-day clinics. And the first day you didn't ride your colt. You just spent the day, saddle him up, and you turned him loose out in the arena, and he worked with them, and you'd bring him back and you'd unsaddle him and move him around a little bit, work with him, have him do some things, and then you'd saddle him back up. And there was this lady there, and she had a really, really well-bred little Colonel Freckles colt. And that lady got in a lot of trouble. So the time that we rode them colts was 4 days out of the 5. And she got bucked off 7 times in those 4 days. And that last day she went up to Ray and she said to Ray, she says, Ray, I'm in a lot of trouble. And of course, typical Ray fashion, he says, I see that. And she says, I don't know what to do. And he says, I see that too. And she says, well, what should I do? And he says, if that gentleman over there, or he didn't say gentleman, he said, if that young man over there would be willing to help you, he says, you might want to get with him. And he pointed over there to me. And so her name was Debbie Hollingsworth. So Debbie came over and asked me if I'd take that horse and work with him. And I said, sure. And I told her we'd take him and try him for 30 days. And at the end of the 30 days, the horse really wasn't a whole lot better. I could sure ride him, go do whatever I want, but he was going to buck. And I created a lot of that. I didn't know how to discourage that. I didn't know how to get around that. And so she says, just keep working with him, work with him for another month. And I said, Debbie, this horse will never suit you. She said, well, that's okay. She says, you just work with him another month. So I did. And of course, at the end of the second month, it was no great miracle or anything. He was still just like he was. We just had another 30 days of the same stuff, So as time went on, she says, would you mind just taking that horse and riding him and keeping him. And you just treat him like he's one of yours, and I'll pay you to feed him and stuff. And so I told her I would. I was kind of needing some horses to ride, and I was doing a lot of day work and first one thing, another. And about a year went by, and I could kind of get him around and get a job done on him. But it was gonna get a little Western before it was over with. So anyways, a year went by, and of course, Ray was coming back to Florida. Actually, Trina and I hosted him that next year, and he came back. And Ray loved to go to a head and heel branding. I mean, he just really enjoyed that. So I set it up where we had, not a lot of calves, but 150, 200 head of calves to go do. So we went to do these calves, and they were in a great big old pen, and the branding was going along good, and I was riding that little horse, and he was doing so good, and of course, Tom's trying to be on his best behavior because Ray's there, and Ray and Trina caught the second to the last calf, and they took it to the branding fire, and they worked that calf, and I can remember it just like it was happening right now. Ray was sitting there. He kind of moved away from the fire a little bit, and he was coiling up his rope. He was like done, because there was only one calf left, and there was probably 10 of us out there just trying to run this calf down and rope it. Well, sure enough, here that calf comes, and he comes flying by me, and Tom couldn't stand it. I mean, I zing it out there, and I catch that calf around the neck, and I'm thinking, by God, I got you. And I stuffed my dallies on that horn. And I mean, I put them all on there. And that old calf, he wasn't that big a calf, but he did snatch that horse when he come tight. And when he did, he blowed up and went to bucking. And down through that pen we went. And that pen was a better part of an acre. I mean, it was a big pen. And Ray was clear down at the other end, just over off kind of to the side, away from where we were branding these calves. And where do you think that horse went? He went straight to him. I mean, it wouldn't have made no difference what I did. I couldn't stop him, but I didn't turn my calf loose, and he's bucking down through there, and he T-bones right into the side of Ray. And Ray seen him coming, but he wasn't going to move. And that colt just run up there and almost like throwed his head up and put it up in Ray's lap, And Ray's petting that horse. And I looked him in the eye, and I said to him, I got to get that shit out of this horse. And he looked at me and he says, I believe I'd leave that in there, and turned around and rode off. And I thought, what are you talking about? You don't. And I told him this later. I didn't tell him this at that moment. I thought, you old bugger, you don't have to ride this damn thing. I do. And I got to get that out of him. And I had no concept of what I was even trying to accomplish. And so about 5-6 months later, Ray calls me on the phone, and he asked me if I'd come to California and help him start some colts that winter. And I said, sure, I'd be tickled to death. I'd love to do that. So anyways, I go to California 5-6 months later, and Ray comes and picks me up at the airport there. And we were going to Winnie Lotta's place there in Gustine. And he picked me up there at the airport there in Merced. And that's before 911. So he could come back, and he was waiting for me there. And I got off the plane, and he didn't say hi. He didn't say, how are you? He didn't say, how's Trina? He always asked about Trina. He said, he didn't say nothing about Trina. First words out of his mouth, what do you think they were? He says, did you ever get that out of that colt? And I said, no, sir. I says, I sure haven't. He says, well, I believe I just leave that in there, and turned around and walked away again. And I thought, you old bugger, you. We're going to get in a pickup. We got about a 30, 40-minute drive. And you're not going to be able to just walk away. And I'm going to ask you about this. So we got going down the interstate there. And I said to him, I said, Mr. Ray, I don't understand. I don't even come close to understand what you're talking about. And that's when he took the time to explain to me. He said, a horse is built a lot in layers, kind of like think of it as an onion. And he says, if you get a bad spot on an onion while it's still growing and you go to picking at it, he says, that bad spot gets bigger and it gets worse and it stays right at the surface. He says, if you can leave that onion alone and maybe put a little fertilizer on it and nourish it a little here, there, a little extra water here and there, he says, layers will start growing over that onion. He says, that bad spot will go away. So I got to thinking about that. And of course, I was there working with some colts that week. Well, there was actually 2 weeks I stayed there with him and was working with them colts and stuff. And I still didn't have the best understanding of that. And that's when he started to kind of would tell me a little something. He'd say, now, leave that alone or you're going to turn that into that big spot that you'll never be able to cover up. He says, it'll stay right on the surface with that horse. And he says, that's probably a little bit what you got going on with that horse you've been riding. So he says, just do something a little different and take that colt back and do something with him that he feels good about, that he understands. And the particular colt I was working with was one of his. And I had it was a little filly. I had her where she'd get real round when she walked around you, kind of really soft and laterally and really line her feet up nice. And then if she got in a little trouble, I just take her back to that and let her do that because she knew how good that felt to her. And those are the things that was so valuable to me working with those horses where it would come through and you could just change their thought before they ever got in that trouble or they felt like they were in trouble, say. And that's the piece that when Ray would say, you need to know what happens before it happens. So when it happens, you know what happened. And then you can encourage the desirable things and discourage the undesirable. And that's where the awareness level came in. And I was always a real observant type person anyways, but he brought that out really, really big in that aspect. So that was one of the times. And Ray had a really unique way of setting you up. And you never knew it. You never knew it was coming, and he'd set you up every now and then. And that led into a whole nother deal. And that was several years later. This was 10, 12 years after I'd been around him. He mentioned one day that thing just went blank. I don't know where Emily.
It's all right. It's all right. I'm here. You're good.
Anyways, it was about 10, 12 years later. We were doing a clinic and we were at my place in Florida where the clinic was. And he mentioned how important that was. And he looked over at me and he asked me, he says, Tom, he says, I've watched you work on that over the years, the knowing what happens before it happens. So when it happens, you know what happened. He says, how do you feel about that? And like I say, I knew the moment I opened my mouth that I had been set up. And I said to him, when I opened my mouth, I says, well, Ray, that's everything. And he says, no, not really. And I thought, criminy sakes, I've been working on this stuff for 10, 12 years. He says, I'm not saying it's not important. He says, but that's not what this is about. And then he just leave you hanging there, And I said to him, I said, I'd known him well enough by then. I felt comfortable asking him. I says, well, if that's not what it's about, Ray, what is this? What are we truly trying to accomplish here with these horses? And he was speaking of Mr. Tom Dorrance. He said, Tom knew what a horse needed before the horse even knew what he needed. And that, Emily, is what opened up a whole new can of worms for me. It totally changed my whole train of thought, the words that I used, how I thought about things. It totally changed that, because now it wasn't what I wanted from the horse that mattered. It's what did he need from me? What could I do or change or do different to better help him where I could understand his needs? And I really went to watching for that in horses. I watched and I think, well, maybe I just do something I would know if it really would work or not, but I'd try it. You know, well, maybe he needs to do this. And a good example of that is Ray told a story one time when there was a bunch of folks at a clinic, and Tom was there, and it might have been one of Tom's clinics. I don't know the specifics on it, but there was a lady there, and they were working on loading horses in a trailer. And there was a lady there, and Ray says you could take one look at that horse and know for a fact that that horse, when she was leading it towards that trailer, was not going to get on that trailer. And Tom, before she ever got to that trailer and got up close to it, Tom says, ma'am, just bring that horse over here and take that horse over there along the edge of that barn where the eave had kind of been dripping off, and the eave had been dripping off, and the grass was real green right there. And he says, just let that horse get him a few bites of grass. And then he went on and worked with some other horses. And then pretty soon, evidently, he must have been definitely keeping an eye on that horse. And right directly, he told that lady, he says, now bring him over here and let's see if he'll get on the trailer. And he walked over there, and that horse just walked right in that trailer. Ray said it was the dangest thing you ever seen. So how did he know what that horse needed? So at that time, I had no clue, but it sure put me to work in that area, I guess you would say. And that's when this all really went to changing for me, you know, and then was really blessed that I got to spend another 10 years with Ray before he passed, and got to kind of have a better understanding of that. So
Can you talk us through maybe just an example, like you when of thinking of what the horse needed? Like, could you like maybe tell us maybe how you would do something or approach a situation differently because of that?
yes, and it enters into everything you do anymore. For me, you know, you might be working, you might have a young horse, or somebody bring you a horse that feels like they're in a lot of trouble or really bothered, and that horse don't even, or maybe having a hard time saddling a horse, or I might have a colt that's real touchy to saddle. That horse has no idea it would be beneficial for him just to learn to back up on the end of that lead rope. And I can take that horse and just play around with him and work with him, and won't even have nothing to do with saddling him, and just get him backing up and thinking about backing up on that end of that lead rope. And then all those saddling issues go away, because once he understands that, and he don't even know he needs that, he don't have a clue that it would benefit him better to back up to be able to be allowed to be saddled. So same with bridling them. You know, you might spend a little time and do a little work with him, kind of on the ground, softening him laterally, and getting that horse to where he'll bring that nose and tip it to you before you ride. He don't know he needs that, but that's something that I know he needs if I want him to succeed in helping me get a job done. It's not about what I want him to do. It's what does he need me to do so that it will set him up where he can get right on through being saddled or bridled or loaded in a trailer. Say, all those little things enter into that. So, and a horse don't know for sure what he needs. He only knows how to be learning what's allowed and not allowed. So say if he's never been saddled before, he don't know how to be when he gets saddled. So there's little things I know I can do with him and get established and working that I know he don't even know he needs it. That'll set him up to make that. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's all tied together.
Yeah.
It's all tied together.
And how does it feel to the horse when you are in that, coming from that place?
It's totally different to him because you're trying to work with him where he's at, not where you want him to be. I see so many folks get caught up in the maneuver and they want this horse to do this maneuver, whether it's whatever it may be, pivot on a hind leg or load in a trailer or soften his nose. They want that nose to come down and in. Well, that's not what it's about. Those things, when you start thinking of it and working at it from that mindset that I'm talking about, softness isn't something you can make a horse do. Softness is something that I feel that horse will reward you with when you present something to him that he understands and feels good. That's what softness is to me. It's not a maneuver of bringing his nose down and in and flexing at the pole. That's not what that is. Softness can be lateral. It can be vertical. It can be level. There's so many things that it can be. So it's a feel. It's not a maneuver. It's not a position. It's a feel that he offers back to you for how you presented something that felt good and he understood. That's my interpretation of what I got from what I felt Ray taught as far as softness goes. And I think it's one of the most valuable things. I don't get worried about getting my horse's nose to come down and in. I don't worry about that. That part ain't important. What's important is that I can present him some different ideas where he feels good enough that he chooses to carry himself that way because there's nothing that feels better to him. He can maneuver better. He can handle himself. He can perform better. And it just feels better to him when he works in that area. So that might be a little more than getting into this a little deeper, but that to me is what this is about.
Yeah.
And him finding another way to be. I see this over and over and over and have had lots of great opportunities. I can't tell you how many opportunities I've had that people come to my clinics and stuff, and they'll allow me to get on their horse and what I used to do when I got on them horses compared to what I do now is so far apart because I didn't have an understanding of it at first. But these horses, they just get to where they just feel so much better inside. And I'm not saying it's always pretty. I'm not saying this is done with a hug and a kiss and a sugar cube. This sometimes you got to get one's attention quite a bit because he don't know another way. He don't know how he could be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the value of this stuff that I got from Ray, and it's with the dogs, it's with cattle, it's with any living animal. So it's been a great journey for me. And Ray always said that, enjoy the journey. He says it's a journey. And another thing he would say, and as time goes on, and he told me this, he warned me this, and I thought he was, and that was another time when I thought he said to me, and he looked me right now, I was saddling the colt and he had it snubbed up. And he told me, he says, you're not going to have a clue what I'm talking about till you're 45 or 50. And I was just barely 30 years old, And I didn't say this to him at that point, but I did tell him this before he passed away. I thought to myself, oh, listen here, old man, and I ain't that damn dumb. It ain't going to take me that long to figure this out, and danged if he wasn't right. And he'd always talk about a gentleman by the name of Ernie Ortega. That was Louis Ortega, the famous rawhide breeder. That was Louis's brother, was Ernie. And he always talked about how Ernie would always say, why does it take a lifetime to learn how to live a lifetime? And there's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of truth in that. But I've been enjoying it. I'll promise you that. It's been great for me.
Yeah.
So
I'm not quite sure how to ask this, but when you were talking before about how Ray would sort of wait, I mean, it strikes me as similar how you're waiting for the horse to be ready to do something, and how Ray would judge whether or not you were ready to hear a certain piece of information or know how to plant those seeds. But talk a little bit about that.
he did that to me real often. I probably felt like this kid needs some help in a big way. I remember one time he called me up and he said that he says, I can't remember. He might have been in California or over on the West Coast. And he says, there's a lady down in Florida that wants us to come to a clinic. He says, if I fly down there, he said, would you bring me a horse? And I says, I'd love to bring you a horse. So a good friend of mine, Derek Wise, and I, we jumped in the truck and trained, of course, and we all loaded up and tan and throwed us some horses in the trailer. And I took one for Ray and we went down there. And I don't know if have you ever seen me working with these horses where I'll get to kind of petting their nose and tipping their nose and kind of lifting on their jaw and it'll come out in their back feet.
Yeah.
I don't know why he thought that was so important at that time. I didn't know why he thought it was so important that I understand that. And he knew I hadn't been doing that. And I'd seen him mess around and do that a little bit. And not a lot, but I seen him do it a few times. And he said, now I don't know how much of this Tom's been doing with this horse. Well, he did know. He knew dang well I hadn't been doing any of it. He took the lead rope of that colt that I brought down there for him to ride. And in 2 seconds, he knew exactly what I've been doing with that horse for a year and a half. And so he kind of got to playing around with that. And what led up to that whole deal is we were at a clinic one time in Trenton, Florida, that I hosted for him. And he had a horse that he ponied in there, and he was getting ready to leave that round pen. And what you'll get a kick out of this story. And that horse was really going to rush out of that round pen, the one he was leading. And the clinic was kind of over with, and he was getting ready to break for lunch. And I was standing there on the round pen watching him, and he went to come out of that round pen, and that little mare got kind of a little bit unsure of things and got a little quick. And he just spent 45 minutes there working with that mare. And I stood right there by the gate watching him. And when he got done, I thought, well, that was pretty cool. I mean, he got her to where she didn't rush out the gate, and she'd kind of feel of him a little bit and step over in his hindquarters and stuff. But I mean, that went right over the top of my head. I wasn't even close to being smart enough to see what happened there. Well, the second time I seen him do that was I think it was the Tom Dorrance benefit, was it? Where the little mare he was riding wanted to kind of leave that round.
Yeah, it was the appreciation
the
clinic.
appreciation.
Yeah.
Okay, it was appreciation. And that little mare, that was the same mare. That was like 6 years later, 7, 8 years later. Anyways, but he was on her that day, and he worked with her, and he was right there kind of by that round pen gate again. And so that kind of tells you how if you ain't careful, them spots can show up. So he worked with her and got her to where she'd kind of soften, and he played with her, kind of tipping that nose and that jaw and working through there and getting it to come out in her back feet. And bam, same deal. Went right over top of my head. I thought it was really cool what I was watching, but I had no clue what the value of that was for them horses. So now back to the deal in Florida where I brought him that colt, and he knew I hadn't been doing that stuff, but it was important for him, evidently, for me to have a little more of an understanding of that. And he says, I don't know how much of this stuff Tom's been doing with his horse. And he went to working with that horse. No, I never seen him start a horsemanship clinic on the ground. He did that day. And that was really cool. And he'd send that, and I had that little horse, he could send him out there and he'd bring him back and send him here and there. But then when he was setting that horse up to get him a little bit better about putting a bridle on, is what it amounted to. And he could feel that, and getting that horse to soften in that jaw laterally and get it to come out in them back feet. And he played with that horse there. And like I say, he said, I don't know how much of this stuff Tom's been doing with this colt, but he says, this is something that's going to help set this horse up. He knew that horse needed that to get better about being bridled. And from that day on, boy, I don't try to overdo that. I don't turn it into an exercise, but I get that going on in a horse real quick. And he don't even know he needs that when he's a yearling or 2-year-old or 3-year-old or even 4-year-old. But what that does for a horse when you get ready to set him up to go into the bridle, Emily, it is so important that somewhere in there, I'm not saying you have to do it because you don't, but what it does for your horse when you get that set up and working for you is unreal. Unreal. It's just a piece that you can put in there, little along and along and along, real subtly here and there. And then when you go to that bridle, he's gonna be right. You're just gonna eliminate a lot of situations. So those, like I say, those times were so precious that I got to be around, and I was so thankful that he never gave up on me. I'd get him pretty frustrated sometimes, and but he never gave up, and I'm very, very thankful for that. So.
Well, I'm sitting here hearing these stories and seeing them in my mind's eye, and it just makes me so excited for October, for Ray Days, to get to hear not only more of your stories but other folks' stories about how Ray's teaching impacted their lives and their horsemanship.
Well, and yes, this is going to be a great event. We're going to do this in New Mexico at Mark and Lee Smith's place, and this is going to be a great opportunity. I know several folks that are coming to that can tell you some stories, and great stories. You of course know Judy Horton and Frank and Tina Lamb, and they're all going to be there, and it's going to be a great 2 days. This good friend of mine, Derek Wise from Virginia, Ray just cherished Derek because Derek never said a word. I mean, if you had to ride in a truck with Derek from Virginia to Las Vegas, you were going to be a lonely soul because Derek didn't say a word. But Ray just really enjoyed that, and he thought the world of Derek. If he was, maybe he canceled the clinic or he had to go back to Idaho or something, he was on the East Coast, he called Derek up. Derek could go get his truck, his trailer, his horses, and take them to his place and keep them for him. And Ray just thought the world of Derek. And Derek's going to be there, and he's got lots and lots of good stories. And that's how I met Derek, was at one of Ray's clinics there just outside of Washington, D.C. And so yeah, it's going to be a great time. I know Lee's got a lot of great stories. I'm hoping, and I'm working on visiting with some of the folks that really has spent a lot of time with Ray. Maybe they'll get an opportunity and be there. I'd love for Carolyn to come if it was possible. So it's going to be a great time, and I'm really looking forward. And I can't thank you enough for helping us get this out there and promoting it also.
Super excited.
And I'll run it by for the folks that don't know exactly what it is about. What this is about is just a gathering of folks that did get to spend time with them, for maybe lack of better words, but this is what we're going to call it, kind of the first generation of folks that are still around now that did get to spend some time with him and have different stories to tell. there's going to be some live music. There's going to be a cookout. There's going to be, you can bring some gear and swap your gear and stuff. So it's just going to be a really good time. But the whole motive behind this is to keep people more aware of what he did and what he done. And, I'm going to say it in a manner of setting it up where young folks or other folks that are interested in going this route, give them some options of some folks that they can kind of be around and set up a scholarship to keep this alive. I know Buck did a great job with putting the stuff together with the legacy and stuff, but I think we need to keep this somewhat going. So this first one that we're going to do is mainly going to be to get the interest there, get some input, some ideas from different folks on how to make this grow into a kind of a scholarship type fund, and where folks can keep learning about this stuff, because I know I'm not getting any younger, and I don't imagine these other guys doing this stuff are either. So that's I think a very important piece. There's a lot of great young folks that has worked with me. I know there's a lot of folks that's worked with Joe and Brian and Buck, and it's been there's a lot of folks. They heard maybe us talk about Ray and stuff, but there's a lot of young folks that's worked with all of us that really can benefit from this, and it's going to be a great opportunity.
Yeah, super looking forward to coming and hearing stories and having good fellowship with folks who are, on the same page with their horses, and it should be great. Well, wonderful. Well, before we open things up for questions, is there anything else on tonight's topic that we need to touch base on before we let folks jump in here and ask you some questions?
I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if it was going around on Facebook. I don't get on Facebook and stuff. But there was a picture of Tom and Ray and Bill just recently, and it talked about how those guys changed the world on how, and that was probably one of the most valuable things, again, that I got from Ray. He wasn't interested in being well known. He wasn't interested in becoming wealthy over this deal. He was just Ray, and he was real. And Tom, no different. I did get to meet Tom. I didn't know Tom. I did get to meet him. I never did get to meet Bill, but to hear Joe talk about Bill and stuff, those guys were just doing what they're doing, but they impacted the world. They weren't looking for fame or notoriety, but they impacted the world on how we work with these horses today. It's something that we sure want to take a moment and be awful thankful for, that those guys allowed us to even hang around. So that would be my say for the day. Those guys did change the world on how horses were worked with. So, and I don't want to lose that. I think it's so valuable, and that's what this is about.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Well, with that, I think if anybody would like to hop on and ask Tom a question about tonight's topic or anything else, you can use the chat to raise your hand, or just turn on your camera and I'll see you. Or if you're not comfortable doing that, you can always type a question and I'll read it from the chat. So don't be shy. It's a nice group of folks. Would love to hear your questions. And while folks are getting brave, I thought of one more thing I wanted to ask you about, Tom. When you were talking about the horse that had the issue going in and out of the round pen gate, it made me think about how much like Ray's horses looked like Ray's horses. I mean, they didn't look like anybody else's horses. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Like why you think that was?
He had an ability to get a horse so excited about doing something for him. And he told me this. He says these horses were put here on earth to please us. A lot of times we won't let them. But Ray had the ability to allow his horses to please him. He brought that out in those horses, and they were willing to do anything in the world. And a lot of folks have maybe read Tom's book or heard Tom talk about, and Ray would always mention, Tom would say this. He said, I would like to know that my horse would crawl up a telephone pole or go down a badger hole. Not that I'd ever ask him to do that, but I know he would, because he tries so hard to please me. And so that's why Ray's horses were that way. They wanted to please him, but he allowed them to do it. It maybe wasn't always working out for me or working out for the next person, or it might not even work out for Ray right away. But when Ray got done with that horse, they had a very, very comfortable understanding that they had no doubt in their mind that they pleased him. And that goes back to all those little things he'd say, like the slightest try and the smallest change, allow your horse to be where he's at. All those neat little quotes that he put on them calendars for over the years, and the little book with Ray's sayings in it, that he had a full understanding of that, and he could bring that out in them horses. That's why they were like they are. Nobody's horses I've ever seen, ever. I've seen some videos and some footage of some outstanding horsemen. I got to watch some really cool footage of Nuno Oliveira working horses in a private setting. This wasn't a commercial video or anything else. Old 8mm footage of him working at the riding club there in Huachipa, Lima, Peru. And unbelievable what he could do with a horse. Them horses had a little piece that they weren't turning loose like Ray's did. And that's because he could bring that up and
Yeah.
that was very, very important. Yeah. And he made them feel important. He was never felt like he was above his horse. Never let that horse even ever think that. So that in my mind is no doubt why the horse never felt like they were threatened by Ray. They just wanted to please him, and that's why he could get so much done with that. So, and
cool.
Kind of something that I'm going to bring up also, not so much on the topic and stuff, but if they need to, they can go to our website to get tickets for Ray Days. That's available on our website. I think you set that up. So there's lots of ways to get access to that. But and not only that, Emily, I feel like he brought that out in a lot of people. I never, the whole time I was around him, I'll end this with one more little story before we have the questions. This is after I'd been riding with him several years, and I had a really, really neat opportunity to ride a little filly that was a daughter of Gunner, and really well bred, and out of a smart little Jerry mare, and she was a neat little horse. We called her Bubbles, and she was a little red roan mare, and really well made, and just an athlete. And she had two blue eyes and a real extreme bald face, kind of went back past her eyes and stuff. And boy, she was doing so great. And then she got to where she'd kind of flick her head a little bit. And I was trying to kind of cover that up and go here and go there. And boy, things just never got really better. And then I kind of would turn up the heat on her one day and nothing was getting better. And finally one day I thought, oh, I'm just going to load her up in the trailer and I'm going to go ride with Ray. Well, of course, that day she didn't even do any of that. She just did everything she needed to do just to please Ray. She just packing me around. And so anyways, I didn't let it bother me that she didn't do it that day. I thought, well, was very aware of it, and I took a lot of notes. But I wrote up to him and I says, Ray, I says, I've been having a little bit of a situation with this mare that hasn't been just the best. And he says, oh, he says, she sure looked like she rode good today. And I says, she did. She rode very well. And I says, but it didn't have nothing to do with me. And he kind of chuckled about that a little bit. And I says, I've really tried to take my time with her and not get her upset and stuff. And I says, that didn't seem to be working. And I says, I really got after her a little bit for it here and there. And he said, first words, right quick. I mean, he didn't let me say another word. He says, well, how'd that work for you? And I says, not too good. And he says, well, he says, Tom, he says, sometimes a guy needs to do a little bit of that to find out that that's not what he needed to do. He never looked down on you for trying. If you didn't try, he'd kick you, he'd hand you your money and send you packing down the road. But if you try and you didn't blame your horse for it, he would stay with you. He would help you work through that. And again, he kind of reassured me. He says, leave that little spot alone. And sure enough, it got better. It did get better. So but he never looked down on folks. He never judged you by what kind of saddle you rode or anything. I remember one of the first clinics, within the first 5 or 10 clinics I went to, we were up in Alabama, and this lady showed up in this little barrel racing saddle, and she said to Ray, she says, what do you think of my saddle? And he says, well, he says, does it hurt you? She says, no. He says, do you like your saddle? She says, oh yeah, I love my saddle. He says, does it hurt your horse? She says, no. He says, well, I don't have one to sell you. He says, so you probably get along pretty good, So he didn't care. And dang well, he went to rode that saddle from me to across this table. But that's not necessarily true. If that's all he had, he wouldn't care. He'd have rode that saddle like anything else. But that's not something he would go by necessarily. But that didn't make no difference to him. It didn't make no difference to him. And that's what I enjoyed about him so much. He was so real about things. And I think them animals, I have no doubt. I don't think they did. I know they felt that in him. And that's where he could get all that stuff working. So anyways, all right.
Cool. Okay, we got some questions here in the chat. So I'm gonna start with Kim. Kim Wineland has asked if you could please describe a little bit the position of and the technique of what you were talking about when you were positioning the head to get the hind end to move.
Kim, probably the most important thing, and I'm trying to think my way through this. Say if you were I stand straight in front of these horses when I work on this, or that's kind of what I interpret Ray doing when you would first start with a horse. This leads into a lot of really interesting stuff. But anyways, standing straight in front of your horse, looking at him, you would say, if you wanted that horse's hindquarters to step over to his right, not yours, but his, I would place my right hand on the bridge of his nose with just some softness in there. Just kind of rub him and pet him. You don't want to get real forceful here because it's just not going to work. And I would take my hand on the bridge of that nose and I'd see if I could just barely tip his nose left or right. And when I say barely, I'm talking about you might not even see him move it. You just feel him move it. And just get him kind of softened up there. And then I would start working that horse's nose off to his left side. And get him to where what you're trying to accomplish is a softness in the bridge of that nose where his head, think of his body here, and his head is on the end of his neck. We'll say my left hand here is his neck, and my right hand is his head. You want to get it to where there's a softness where that horse's head totally will rotate on the end of his neck. Now, when you first start this, we'll get into a whole nother deal here, but it's important to understand that when you start working that nose off to your right, it'd be his left side, and he starts to soften that, he's going to put a lot of bend in his neck, maybe. If he don't push back or root at you, a lot of horses will root at you, but you got to get him to where he'll allow you to kind of keep your hand there and have an understanding and allow you to get him to kind of to giving pressure to your hand on the bridge of his nose and tipping his head. Once you do that, I take my left hand and I set it up underneath his jaw. And I'll kind of lift a little bit on the round corner of that jaw. I'll just kind of lift that, allowing him to think that he could step forward into me. I'm not asking him to step into me. I'm getting him ready to step into me. So he's going to start thinking, come forward. What I'm trying to do there is soften the bridge of his nose, lift the jaw to get him to load his front feet with all his weight, knowing where his weight is in his body. And you want him to get all that weight up on his front feet so that his hindquarters will come alive. Now, he don't even know that what's fixing to happen to him. This is a thing, again, that you could do to help some things that the horse don't even know he needs this yet. But getting them horses to tip up on their front end and soften the bridge of that nose. Now, you might end up taking a step towards him and bending and putting a lot of bend in his neck to get this done the first time or two. To really get him to soften the bridge of that nose, pick up his jaw, get his front feet loaded, you might have to take his head all the way around, dang near back to his side, to his shoulders and his rib cage, if he'll soften that far. The moment you feel him load them front feet, I don't release this necessarily, but I get real soft to him and let him kind of just hang out there for a minute. Or maybe might just be a second. And then I'll go right back in there. And all you're doing is teaching that horse to give to the pressure of your hands. Once a horse learns to give to pressure, then they can become lighter. Once he becomes lighter, then he'll have an opportunity to find that softness in there. And then he'll reward you by stepping them hindquarters over. That's what I'm trying to accomplish. So that when I get on that horse in that bridle bit, I don't know if you ever had a chance to be around, right? Emily will know what I'm talking about. We would always hear him say, I spend the younger part of my horse's life getting him soft to supple, not loose and sloppy, so that the latter part of his life, he could be straight and firm, not stiff and hard. So that's what sets these horses up to have an understanding of that bridle bit so much better. Because when you go in there, that bridle bit is more solid and has a more firmness to it. You can get a lot of refinement by going to up into your bridle if you have an understanding how to get him prepared for it. And this is one of the most important things that I find that I personally can use to help that horse better understand that bridle bit when I get to it, where they're not rooting on it or fighting with it or confused by it. And that doesn't, I say fight it. They do that because they're frustrated and they don't have an understanding of it. So I don't know if that'll give you an idea or help you, but that would be the best way I would know how to explain that in this particular situation.
Thanks for asking for clarification on that, Kim. That was great, and she gave us a thumbs up, so I think she got it.
Go home and have fun with it. Play around with it.
Yeah. So Janice asks, when I was at your clinic in May, we talked about getting softness in your horse that goes to his feet, and you showed me how Ray would have the horse roll up into the bridle. Still working on this. Is this something you could talk a little bit more about?
This is really interesting, and I know when I get to visiting about this, it kind of can maybe upset some folks, but I'll just tell you how I feel about that. I'm old enough now where I don't really care if it upsets them, because it is the truth. Watching Ray all those years, getting those horses to soften and round up, I never seen him use his hands much. You never seen Ray do nothing, and everything happened is what it amounted to, unless you started to really understand him and read what was going on. Ray might be sitting there just visiting with you, and that horse might be just standing there with his head down, his eyes closed, and you might think he's sleeping. And Ray would just, I mean, the slightest little movement. I mean, you wouldn't even see him move, but he'd kind of straighten his back a little bit, and that horse would stand up on all 4 feet. I mean, come to attention. And he'd never move his hands. And that horse would just kind of start softening in that nose and standing up. And I watched that for years and years and years, and I could not figure out what was going on there. And he would always talk about with our colts, pick up on them bridle reins and see if you can't get them to soften, get them to tip that nose down and in. He didn't necessarily say pull that horse's nose down and in. He said, just pick up on your bridle reins, kind of get gathered up, not to the point that you're pulling on him, but then take your lower leg and sit up in that saddle and get up off that horse's back, kind of like levitate a little bit, and come in there with that lower leg. And you want to lift that horse's belly and his abdomen up to round that backbone. Once that backbone lifts, it allows that neck to let the head drop. And that's kind of a little bit understanding the biomechanics of the horse. But I never seen Ray pick up his bridle reins and put pressure on him to pull that horse's nose down and in. He would feel of that horse, and his hand might be right where it needed to be, but he never moved that hand, and he'd round them horses up. And it's what I'd hear him talk, ride both ends to the middle, ride both ends to the middle. Well, he's got a tail and he's got a nose. How are you going to get that to come together? That was my thinking. So as time went on and I started understanding how to lift them horses, that's when it became more of a true softness, which then prepared that horse for maximum collection. So therefore, you could get peak performance from him. I don't know if Janice, I know when we talked about this stuff on your little buckskin horse you was riding and stuff, that is really something that's very, very important, to be able to feel your way in there and be able to lift that horse and round him up. That, and when you offer him those things in return, if he has an understanding of it, you'll feel a softness, you'll feel a lightness, and you'll feel being able to maneuver and handle that horse anywhere you want to go, like you've never felt before. So
Thanks, Janice. That was a great question to ask. And if you need any more clarification, just let us know. But that great answer. I see a couple of folks have their microphones on, and just if anybody's got a question, go ahead and talk into class. Don't be shy.
Hey, Emily.
Hey, Mike, we can hear you.
Oh, hey, Tom.
Yes, sir.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing real good. How about you?
Well, I'm doing good too. And things are good. So I got a question, or maybe something you might want to maybe talk about a little bit. Is how much do you think individual personality in the horse plays a role in how soon they'll turn loose, or how much you have to do to get them to that point compared to a different personality? You think it's a big deal, these different personalities that we have to deal with?
I don't think so, Mike. And the reason why I don't think so is once you get this mindset working for you, none of that really matters, because you're working with that animal as that individual and that personality. Now, we all know there's maybe, if you want to get into the science of all this stuff, and I don't get too far into that, they put them in different groups of different types of personalities and stuff. I don't get into that. It's more to me an individual, and you'll notice different characteristics about different horses that are maybe similar, which of course, then therefore you have that particular personality, but it makes no difference to me, Mike, at all. I mean, it just does, that don't even enter into the picture. I just know that I have to maybe change, or I have to adjust. And this is a good question, Mike. This is where Ray would tell you, you might have to adjust to fit that situation. And so you just adjust to what that horse needs. And that's where I tell a lot of young folks, well, I tell a lot of people this, try to get around as many horses as possible. If you're really serious about this type of horsemanship, the best thing you can do is expose yourself. If you don't have hardly any experience at all, a lot of times you can get a job working on one of these guest ranches or something, and you get to deal with 50, 60, 100, 150, 200 head of horses. And you're going to run into all different kinds of situations. But that's the neat part of being able to adjust to fit that situation, understanding the needs of that horse. Does that kind of give you some ideas?
Well, I'm thinking I was a little more thinking about the time difference between you have one horse that's really quick and willing to come with you, and then the next horse is a little more dominant in his personality and he might take another week or another 2 weeks to get to the same point that this softer kind of horse. That's what I was kind of referring to is if you recognize that difference, or do you
No doubt you have to, if you're going to get anywhere at all. And it, Mike, what my mindset is on that is what I get done with one horse in 2 weeks, I would never even think of, so to speak, comparing what I could do with another horse. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I might get a lot more done. Let's just kind of throw out an example there. You got this horse that's real quick to learn. You mess with him 5-10 minutes. You got him saddled up, moving around pen. 15 minutes later, you're riding him. This other horse, that's not in the cards for this other horse. So you might spend a little more time, but the next thing you know, in 2 weeks, you got that horse that maybe you didn't get to ride that first 15 minutes. He's way better to deal with on the ground than the one that you just went on with. You got to come back and maybe catch that colt up in that area. So I don't think of it as I have to go slower. I do have to do things different. I have to be very aware. And that was something, Ray, I remember, and I'm sure you heard him say this. I mean, I know you have. He would always talk about working with your horse where he's at, not where you want him to be. And the importance of that is being able to adjust to fit those different situations and be able to get those kind of things done. And I guess I don't ever think of comparing that one horse to that next horse. Emily, for some reason, the screen has went blank on my part, but that is something that's very, very important to take in consideration with every horse. But getting back to what I was going to say, Ray would start his clinics out. You've heard him say this. He says, "I'm here for these horses. I'm here for me, and you can have what's left over." And and a lot of times I'd hear him add a little to that. He says, it's not my responsibility to teach you a damn thing. He says, but he says, it is my responsibility to get you folks more aware of being aware. And that awareness was something that he really, really helped me a lot with. And when you get more aware like that, you see things more in a positive way. There was nothing ever negative about Ray around them horses. I mean, if he was bucking you off and kicking you and stomping you on the way by and running over you and pawing you on top of the head, that was okay with Ray. He just had to figure out what he had to do a little different to keep that from happening again, you know. So those horses that might not be more sure in one area that you can maybe get done, next thing you know, you got him way further along in a place that you might not have your colt that was easier. So I guess I don't think about comparing them being slow. A lot of people, I hear this all the time. Well, that horse is way behind. Behind what? What is he behind? Who's judging this deal? Who's putting this deal in a category where he has to be here, he has to be there? So he's really not behind. He is where he is, and that's what you want to work with, for me.
Yeah,
and
good.
And it's more of a frame of mind. This stuff isn't even horsemanship. It was Ray's philosophy, and it's more, if a guy can change his mind set on how he looks at things and of course, the older I get, I just get more weird every day, but I don't care anymore, so.
But you're not old yet, Tom.
Well, I'm older.
Yeah, I know you are older, but you're not old yet.
Yeah.
Not old yet. We're just kind of heading that direction.
Right. That's right. So.
Thank you, Mike. Great question. Good question. Tom, Margaret asks, can you talk a little bit more about lightness and softness? If you have softness, will you always have lightness?
This is a really, really good question, because I've seen a lot of what I would call heavy horses be really soft. That might be almost impossible, but I've seen it over and over and over. And I've seen a lot of really light horses that had no idea what softness was. So just because you have lightness don't mean you'll have softness. Now, if you can ever get some softness working for you, and this is something that, like I say, you can't make happen. This is what these horses give you. If you can ever get that horse giving you some softness, you take what I speak of as, say, kind of when you have a really gentle, real laid back, easygoing kind of horse, a lot of times people say, well, they're kind of heavy on their front end or this, that, or that. I'm not saying they're not, but if you can ever get a little softness working in that horse and get him to turn loose in that area, you will have some lightness. Lightness will, and I'm not saying he's going to be like light as a feather, but he's going to be lighter than he was, and he will give you that softness in return for that. And that has been a very, very interesting topic and subject that I've really studied on with these horses over the years, Margaret. So to answer your question, if you have softness, you will have a certain amount of lightness. Will it be as light as maybe the next horse gets? No. But can they get light? No doubt. No doubt can they get light. Or they can just stay heavy. And if they're heavy, a lot of times you won't be really getting a softness. But I see a lot of horses that get really light. They get real light, real feeling, but they don't ever feel like they can turn loose there and soften. And there's a big, big difference in that. Good question, though. Very
Yeah.
good question.
Thanks,
So,
Margaret. Thanks, Margaret. Okay, let's see. Oops, I just lost Christina's question. Okay, Christina says, when you are trying something with a horse and it just isn't working and you don't have the feel to know what the horse needs, is it best to just try anything else?
oh, for sure. For sure. Ray would tell you the first time he does something, it might have been an accident. But if he does it again, now there's a pattern. And if he does it a third time, now it's become a consistent pattern. Now, if that's what you want him to do, you keep encouraging that. If that's not what you want him to do, you have to change. Don't, we all know that if we keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, that we're going to fall over in the category of an insanity. So on that situation, I would rather see you try something than do nothing or just keep doing the same thing over and over because they're just going to get frustrated. You keep doing the same thing over and over. And then that's where, if we're not careful, that's where we can get hurt or something. So I would rather see you try anything else. Go back to doing something you know that they enjoy doing, that they feel 100% sure they're pleasing you, and then build back into what you're working on. Does that make sense, Christina?
Great question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Good, thank you. And Kim, did you want to hop on and ask your question? Feel free to turn on your camera and your mic and just jump on in.
Oh, where is my camera? I forgot. Gosh,
Lower
it's been a while.
hand. Lower left hand. Do you see
Start
the
video. There
There
we
you
go. Cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. Okay.
That
Let
would
me
be,
hit it again.
that'd be on
Start
you,
my
Emily.
video.
I know. I just asked her to start
It's
it.
not
There we
her.
go.
It can't be her.
There you go. Well, maybe. Do you have a piece of tape over it?
Oh, I do, Emily. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry, you guys.
No worries.
That's my
no worries.
son-in-law. He's like, Kim, people watch you.
It's not Hollywood. So
Oh my gosh,
no
I know.
worries.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you guys so much for doing this. I absolutely love these. Emily, it's been a while. I haven't seen you.
Yeah, good
So
to
nice
see
to
you.
see you. So I have a couple questions, Tom. I did get to work with Ray. I have worked with Buck for years, and Peter, and some of these wonderful, wonderful men like yourself. So it's nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
So I was wondering about the resistive horse, the horse that already has the brace, the horse that hasn't had what you're talking about. Do we go all the way back? Do we go all the way back to try to get them to just listen to the smallest thing that we could offer? Because they're so defensive. Some of them they've been handled ill. And long story short, I help a lot of kids, love kids, but I help a lot of them. And, patience, and I want to win and I want to go fast. And so just breaking into that category of trying to help them, and we got to slow down and also help them understand that.
Well, and that goes back to probably one of the real valuable things Ray helped me with, and he kept telling me over and over again, he says, the fastest way for you to get to where you want to go is to slow down. When he said fastest way to get there, I'm thinking, oh man, I'm ready for this,
Yeah.
and that is not what I wanted to hear, but it's the truth. It is the truth.
Yeah.
But getting back to your question, and again, I'm going to try to put this to you in a way you're not going to get the answer you want to hear.
It's okay. It's all good.
But I'm gonna tell you the truth. These horses are not what I would say necessarily resisting. I don't think of it like that.
Okay.
When I get around a horse and I feel a little that in a horse, maybe where there's a brace or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
I look at it like this horse has got a little self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud of him for that. I want him to have that. I
Mhm.
want him to know how to take care of himself. But then the other thing that it don't take long when you start thinking in this frame of mind, these horses just roll over and get soft to you in just matter of minutes because you're not wanting to force something on them. And you're not looking at this like they're resisting anything or that they have a brace. I look at it like this little guy here, maybe he's been maybe extremely misunderstood. And what can I do? I'm going to do something, and it's going to be totally different how I present it to him than anything he's ever felt.
Uh-oh. Tom froze.
See that stuff coming out of them horses, and it gets really, really good to them, Kim, because you're not that person that's going to cause that horse to resist. You're never going to give him a chance to resist, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. 100%.
But
Yeah.
you have to start with a different train of thought.
Yes.
And I'm not saying I get upset over this, but a lot of times folks will come to me and they'll bring a horse and maybe they're not getting along just the best, and they say, well, this horse has got a lot of holes in him. No, he don't have no holes in him. He don't have a hole in him at all. He's doing just fine when you're not around. He gets along just perfect.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying that the horse may not have some places that he needs some help.
Right.
That's your responsibility if that's what you're going to take on to be able to help him with those different things. It's not what I want that even matters. It's not the maneuver I want you to do that matters. It's how do you feel, how that horse feels about himself while he's around me. Because that changes. When he's not around you, he may feel totally different than the next person. But you're presenting him something that he probably more than likely never going to have felt before. He's not going to have a clue how to understand it. That don't make no difference. Those are different things that you can do to help that horse. And he's going to have no doubt in his mind. It's never been presented to him before. So that mindset alone will get you a long, long ways with these horses. And that's what Ray had. Ray never felt like a horse was out to get you or trying to hurt you or anything. Now, can they? No doubt. No doubt they can hurt you. But it's not because he wanted to. He didn't know any other way to be. Emily, you get a chance to visit with Emily someday. Emily and I had a really, really, really interesting conversation a few years ago. She came to our place here in Buffalo, Wyoming, and spent a little time with us. And I was trying to explain some things and stuff to her, and she asked me a question. Well, why is that horse like that? And I said, Emily, I says, these are two simple words, but I says they are so, so powerful. He don't know any other way to be. So that's what he is. He only knows to be that way until I present something to him different. So it's you knowing that horse can be and find another way to be if you set him up to search for him.
And they will search.
Oh, these animals want to please us. It hurts, It's
after
like Ray
all
said,
the stuff.
Ray says, look in the mirror. Some days it really hurts, but they want to please us. We just won't let them.
Yeah.
We gotta put us aside. And you heard Ray talk about it. You've heard Ray talk about it over and over, how he felt Tom Dorrance was a man with no ego, and you got to have an understanding of that. We are the only living species on the face of the earth that has an ego. So the horse has no comprehension of that.
Yeah.
So in that area, putting that aside, when you change that mindset and you start digging around in there and trying to figure out, what does he need? What can I do different to help him? Things will go to changing. And then them horses, they get to where I tell people they don't even show up. When they get to you, they already know it. They know it's going to be different. And we can get into a whole deeper deal here.
I needed to hear that. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Get into that tonight, but
no, thank you. I appreciate
you're
it.
welcome.
Perfect.
Thank you, Kim. Great
Yeah.
question.
Thank you.
And so Ronald has asked, could you speak a little bit about what you think Ray meant when he spoke about getting a horse to feel like it had a well-oiled door hinge on each side of his pole?
Well, that would Ronald, that would go back to the subject that we spoke about, getting these horses to where they can kind of hinge their head on the end of that neck, and how important that was. And I've watched Ray just take the weight of the lead rope and put that weight on one side of that horse's jaw or the other on that halter, just the weight of that lead rope, and that horse's hindquarters come alive and comes out in his feet. And that was that horse having a very, 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 very good understanding of how to hinge his head on the end of his pole, be able that lateral softness and getting it to come out in their feet. And I'd watch him. He'd tip that nose, his horse's nose, he'd tip it off to the right, and that horse would just go to walking to his left, or he'd side passing, and he could do it out on the end of a 50-foot, 60-foot rope. That didn't phase him one bit. So that's and then it sets that horse up. It just sets him up for so many things. It just sets him up for all your upper maneuvers, your half passes, your leg yields, your haunches in, haunches out. All those maneuvers come off of that. Setting these horses up to how to carry themselves properly in a bridle. It's a real key piece to that. So that goes again back to what he was talking about, getting those horses to be able to soften the bridge of that nose, be able to lift that jaw, and get them weight up on them front feet, and they come out in them horses' back feet, and be able to get that horse to soften all the way out to the end of his tail. Yes.
Thank you, Ronald. Great question. Good clarification there. And Emerson asks, along the lines of the lightness and softness question that Margaret asked, can you talk a bit about the difference between feel and timing, and can you have one without the other?
Well, I tried that and it didn't work too good. Ray checked me up right quick. I don't know, Emerson. I do know, because I'm talking now about myself. I'm not talking about anybody else. But I do not think I would ever had a very good. I had pretty good timing because I stayed in a wreck all the time, and I had good enough timing to get out of them. But I had no feel, and I don't think I could have ever got. I know I would have never got to my softness, Emerson, if I would have never got a better understanding of feel, no matter how good my timing was. And Ray said this over and over. He says, it's got to come in that order. Feel, as you become more aware of your feel, and your feel gets better, of course, your timing will become better. And as your timing will become better, things will become more balanced. And that's the piece where that horse gives you that softness in return for your presentation of feel and timing. I don't know if that'll help you in that area, but yes, I think it's very, very important that your feel, as your feels gets better, even if you got great timing. That's where he did say I had good timing. That was my only savior, is once I did go to work and in understanding I had no feel and that there was something else there to work with, then my timing just got better again. It like doubled because of the feel came in there, and having a somewhat of an understanding of that to be able to work with. But yes, and then those horses really, really become balanced. Yes. So I think that's real important in there to be able to get your softness, is to have your feel and your timing working for you.
Great question, Emerson. Let's see. Janice asks, following up on that regarding the timing part. I know that we need to learn feel what happened before it happens. Would you say is too late? In other words, when does the correlation get lost for the horse once you've made a request? You can hop on and ask that better than I can read it, Janice.
I'm not even sure I know what I'm trying to say, how to say it. When you ask a horse for something, anything, how do you know, like, what is the time frame that you have to get a response, so that the horse understands the correlation between the ask and maybe the follow-up or something like that?
This is going to be kind of a typical Ray answer. It'll be just enough. And that really, really sucks for an answer, but it is the truth. But to be able to help you maybe better understand that, the time that you have in your timing will be what's necessary. And again, that's not a real great answer, but what I'm getting at is I would make sure whatever you're asking, before I got in too big a hurry in that particular area of wanting a response, I would make sure that he had a good understanding of what I was asking of him. If he has no clue of what I'm asking of him, this may take a while. But once you see him try, once you see him, let's just use this for an example, Janice. Say you're asking that horse to back up 3 steps, and you're on the end of your lead rope, and you're working at getting him to back up. Well, long before it ever comes out in his feet, you're going to see him kind of raise his head, maybe elevate his head a little bit, and then it's not going to come out in his feet. Well, he don't even know what you're asking him to do. See, at this point, let's say, so you increase that pressure a little bit, and he just elevates his head a little more. Well, I know, and he can only lift his head so high, and then pretty soon he's got to move his feet. So right. I don't get too excited about him elevating his head, because he's just protecting himself. That's just Mother Nature and natural instinct. So I just keep working on it, and he's only going to go so far before it's going to come out in his feet. Now, once it comes out in his feet, now he knows how to take a step back. So then you can go in there and ask again, because maybe the first time it was just an accident. So it might take just as long the second time to get him to back up a step, say. So the second time he finally backs up a step and say, okay, now I know it takes you just a little while to get there. No big deal. So then you might go in there and ask him again, and maybe it don't take quite as long. And say, oh, now he knows. So then, say the 4th time you go in there, 5th time you go in there and ask him, you can say, hey, you need to work at this. I'm gonna put a little more life in there a little bit sooner. Well, he's going to do one of 2 things. He's either going to throw his head up and his feet's going to get stuck, or he's going to move quicker. Say, either one, you're going to back off. Everybody says, well, if you back off because he did it, you rewarded him. If you backed off because he didn't do it, you rewarded him for not backing up. Not necessarily. You rewarded him an opportunity because he maybe didn't understand that amount of pressure. Kind of like Mike was talking about. One horse might accept this quicker than others. Well, that horse that don't, you're going to have to take a little time in there with him. Then you're going to have to go a little slower with that horse, say. So those are things, knowing that there's horses out there pick up on this faster. Well, then you can turn up the heat on that horse and say, hey, now I expect you to kind of put a little effort in it. And pretty soon you'll see them horses get the life in there, and they won't be upset in that head. They won't elevate that horse. That horse won't elevate his head. Ray said the only way a horse can ever get smooth on his feet is if you get smooth on his head. Once you get smooth on his head, he will get smooth on his feet. Therefore, in return, once he's smooth on his feet, he'll be smooth on his head. He'll be quiet on his head. Say,
Yeah.
does that kind of give you
Oh,
some
yeah,
thoughts
definitely.
there to play with?
Definitely. And, you know, it's hard to put into words, I'm sure, but I understand what you're saying. It really is. And thank you for your previous answer too. That was very helpful. Yeah, to apply it, of course, is always the fun part, trying to figure it out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And don't get frustrated. We'll come back through New Hampshire one of these days, or
Yeah.
we might catch up with you somewhere.
Yeah, we're actually making, I think, pretty good progress. He's a lot happier, seems to be.
Good.
And, yeah, we're kind of bonding, I guess, in a way.
I knew that was in that little horse. You just had to get it to come out in him.
Yeah, he's turning into a really nice horse. And
Yeah.
like I say, he's happier, which makes me happy.
For sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. And I just want to, like, Karen, you have your microphone on. I just want to make sure you don't have a question that you want to ask. You might just have it on and not know that you have it on, but don't want anybody to go away without getting to ask a question that they want to ask. So, nope. All right. Well, boy, my brain is pretty full, Tom. I've got a lot to think about. Does anybody else need any clarification on anything we've talked about tonight? Oh, let's see. Madison says, do you find there is a balance between asking for something without enough energy, which allows the horse to respond without engaging their body enough to move soundly?
I don't know. I mean, I think if a horse, I don't think it takes much energy. Let's put it this way. Either he's sound or he's not. I don't think the lack of energy that you're putting into him would cause him, say, if you didn't put enough energy into him, would cause him not to move sound. We've all rode horses, and you can kind of feel them get maybe tired or a little bit, call it lazy or whatever you want, and maybe stumble a little bit here and there. But I don't think that would cause a horse to move unsound. No.
Thank you, Madison. All right, let's see. Oh, Emerson's popping back in. Ronald asks, Ray used to say sometimes you have to give something you haven't given to get something you haven't got. Is there an example of how this has shown up in your journey?
Oh, Ron, it seems like it's every dang day sometimes, because, and I guess the reason I say it's every day is there's so many things I know deep down inside that's still going on in that horse that I don't have, or that I haven't tapped into. You heard, along with that saying, you heard Ray say it over and over and over again. People that ride in horses today, they'd be lucky if they get 10 to 15% of what the horse has to offer. In my mind, the first thing that came to my mind is what in the world is the other 85% doing, or 90% doing? So there's so much in there that I haven't tapped into yet. So what does that tell you? I mean, deep down inside, what does that really tell you? There's a lot of stuff I haven't gave yet, because in order to get that, I have to give something. So that means I haven't been given something in that place to be able to get more from that horse. And it's not because the horse don't want to give it to me. I'm not letting him give it to me. I'm not allowing him to give it to me. I'm in his way. Ray told me 30 years ago, and I guess might even be longer than that, because he's been passed away more than 10 years. So anyways, he told me over and over, he says, Tom, quit training them horses. He'd get on to me about this. He says, quit training them horses. He's that horse can do anything you want him to do when he's out there in that pasture loose running around. The only time he can't do it is when you get on. Because where I'm in his way, I'm trying to train him. And so I give up training animals years and years ago. And he kept saying, just ride them with a little quality. And when I started giving that up, I gave that up, or I gave that, boy, my horses gave a lot back to me when I give up the thought of training him, because they can do it already. All you got to do is ride them with some quality and allow it to come out in them. But there's a lot of things I know that hasn't come out in my horses that I could probably have. I just haven't gave them the time and the opportunity to allow that to happen. So yes, I deal with that on a regular basis. And I think it's a really, that was a very, very good question. And there's a lot of deep thought goes into that one. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, Karen, did you have a question? No. Okay.
Did Elena have a question?
Elena said, when Tom told me to quit training, that was some of the best advice.
Okay. Good for her.
Yeah.
No question, Tom, but a lot of good stuff to think about. I'll probably be giving you a phone call with questions once I stew on some of this stuff.
Right. For sure. Well, you're welcome anytime.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
Well, gosh, this has just been wonderful. And you guys have been just a great group, asked some really good questions and really took things in a wonderful direction. And Tom, so appreciate your time and sharing all your stories. Gosh, I just love to hear all the Ray stories. And like I said, look forward to hearing more in October and in the next time we have a class.
You bet. Yeah. And like I say, if anybody has any trouble, they can either contact you or I as far as getting tickets for Ray Days. I know it's available on our website. Got a deal set up where you can go through. I think it's her website, correct?
I put the link in the chat, and I'll if anybody else wants it, but yeah, the link is there to purchase tickets, and there's more information about the event, sort of the schedule of events, and there's an interview with you and Lee on there. So yeah, and if anybody has any questions, contact Tom or Lee and get more details.
And the most important thing I want everybody to know, we're doing this in honor of what Ray did for us. And I know there's so many of you folks. I can remember when Ray got to the point where he couldn't maybe even hardly ride anymore. And I can remember when Elena she wasn't better. I called her a little wood tick. She'd stick to them horses like a little wood tick, and she'd go ride with him and stuff. And that is so precious. And so we're sure looking forward to all you folks coming and having a great 2 days there.
I want to make sure you hear this, Tom, because Sandy wrote in the comments, Tom, you were my aha moment when I audited your clinic in 2012/13. The following year, I came with my horse, a little Arab that could turn on a dime. I still have that Arabian, and I'm still learning to give him what I've never given him to get what I have got. Missing you from Canada.
Good deal. Well, thank you, Sandy.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Again, thank you so much for coming, and have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you in the next class.
Sounds good. Thank you, Emily.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Bye.